One of the things that is being thrown around and that I hear often is, it's not about the people in the room. It's about where I feel like I belong. But we can't do that unless we belong to ourselves. We can't belong to others unless we belong to who we are. What if belonging isn't something we find, but it's something we create? It's something we make possible. Most of us, if we're honest, have a version of this experience. You're in a room full of people, whether it's a workplace, a social event, a party you've been invited to, even sometimes in our own homes. And you feel, underneath everything, just not quite there. Like it's not quite your space. Like you don't know where to stand. You don't know who to talk to. You look around the room and see people that you know, but you're not sure if you should go over. You kind of just want to hide in the corner and scroll on your phone and hope that no one asks what you're doing. Now, I know this feeling. I've been here. And if you've been there too, you're not alone. It happens to us all. And this is where connection exists, but belonging doesn't. We're surrounded by people and we can go and connect with them, but we don't really feel like we belong. We don't know who our group of people are. We don't know who our people in the room are that allow us to have that intimate level of connection or even relational, which I unpacked in the last episode. If you didn't catch that one, go and listen to it. And so it's no wonder that right now, one of the things that is being thrown around and that I hear often is, it's not about the people in the room. It's about where I feel like I belong. But we can't do that unless we belong to ourselves. We can't belong to others unless we belong to who we are. And I think sometimes this is missed when it comes to unpacking what belonging actually is and what it is we're searching for. Now, if you don't know, my name's Amy Green and I am host of this podcast, Rethinking Success. And today's episode is all about the idea of belonging, and it's about the paradox of belonging. It's one of the things I unpack in a chapter in my new book, The Wellness Paradox, and I really want to approach this one carefully. I really want to have some thinking time for us around belonging and connection and what's going on. And as I mentioned, I did start this in the last episode, but I want it to feel like you're not trying, because I know everyone is trying. And sometimes I think the search for belonging gets pushed outward. We'll have the morning teas, we'll have the social gatherings, we'll put on the parties, we'll go to the park runs, and we'll try and feel like we can find belonging through connection. But actually, especially in the workplace, it exists in places we're not always looking. And by that, I mean not the social events or the gatherings, but in the structures, in the conditions, in regard to how we actually build what belonging is, because it happens in the small moments. It happens in the moments we build trust. It happens in the moments we get to be ourselves. It happens in moments where we feel like we don't have to perform, where we don't have to say a certain thing, where we don't have to act a certain way, where we can just be ourselves and not feel like if we don't, we're going to be judged or ridiculed or miss out or punished in some way. And so in the paradox of belonging, what I explore, there are a couple of things, but one of them is that if we're focused on, finding the right community or the right workplace or the right relationship or the right friendship, the right social group, and we haven't actually figured out how to belong to ourselves, it's never going to be enough. There's a lot of inner work that comes with belonging, and it is through self-efficacy and through self-trust and self-awareness. And sometimes belonging in its most deepest sense is an inside job and an inside out experience. It begins with whether or not we allow ourselves to be fully present. So not performing, not curating, not managing how we're perceived in the spaces we're already in. And that can be tricky if self-trust is low, if self-awareness is low, if self-efficacy is low. And so even though we might feel like we're searching constantly for belonging, when it's driven by the idea that the problem is somewhere else, that it's always something else, that it's always this or that, then there starts to be an obstacle around how we can actually cultivate true belonging. And I have gone through this myself. I have felt like I haven't belonged in places, workplaces, friendship groups, outgrown friendships, having had good social groups in workplaces, got a promotion, being pushed out of that social group. These are things that happen. And for a long time, I started to blame everything else. I thought it was everything else. And what I realized was it was because I didn't trust me. I didn't have high levels of self-confidence, even though I might have looked like it. On the inside, I was filled with doubt, and I was questioning whether or not I was good enough, and, maybe if I just said this and not that. And to be real frank with you now, I just don't care. I mean, I care, but I have let go of the idea that I have to perform and act a certain way to fit into every room and every friendship circle and every event and every gathering and every team at work, because the more I did that, the more exhausted I was, in terms of thinking that if I just make myself like what everyone else wants it to be, the more I'll feel like I will belong. And that didn't happen. The more I acted a certain way, curated a certain version of myself, performed a certain way, the less I felt like me. And so even though there was a perception of belonging, I didn't really belong because I wasn't being me in the first place. And so we have to be really aware of what that inside-outside nature of belonging is. And, there's recent research that consistently shows the experience of belonging is not purely a function of being welcomed. It's also about knowing you can show up authentically. And this word, it gets thrown around a lot. Authentic, authentic, authentic. Now, I'm actually a believer that there are different versions of authenticity, because how I conduct myself right here, right now, doing this podcast for you would be very different if I was having a chat to my partner at the kitchen bench, or a FaceTime with my niece who's 2 years old, or a conversation with my brother about, whatever's going on in his life, versus if I was presenting and doing a keynote, or if I was facilitating with a group of leaders, or meeting and doing some strategic work with a group of people around a table from a board. Does it mean I'm not authentic because I slightly alter who I am in those places? Absolutely not. I'm just choosing the version of authenticity that fits in that scenario. And I can tell you that every single one of them is not performing. It's actually the version of authenticity that I'm choosing to bring to the space that's going to serve me. But I'm not fitting in a box. I'm not going, don't say this, do say that. I mean, look, let's be real. If I'm going in to facilitate or do a keynote or sit with a group of advisors around a boardroom to do some strategic work, I'm not swearing in that room. I am dressed in a certain way, but I'm choosing to do that intentionally because I know that's what actually builds my confidence, my efficacy, and my ability to show up in those rooms. Now, my partner, kitchen conversation, chatting with my niece, my siblings, totally different Amy. They get totally different Amy. They know Amy in a different way. We've grown up together. Obviously, my siblings, my partner and I have been together 15 years. They just know a different version. The authenticity is real in every situation. And so when I do that, I belong because I belong to myself first. I don't have to prove to anyone I belong there. I just believe that I belong there. And this, I think, is the difference between trying to falsify or curate a version of yourself to belong, instead of just believing that you belong in those places. And the more I started to do this, what actually happened was there was a letting go of spaces, of rooms, of friendships. And that's hard. That's hard at times because you've held on to something for so long. But the more I've done it, the more I realize I belong in certain spaces and some I just don't. And that's okay. Or sometimes when I show up to an event or to a room or to a social gathering, I'm not expecting to get deep belonging out of it. I'm just kind of expecting to, have some connection, have a chat to people about whatever might be going on, but I'm not expecting to get deep levels of authentic belonging. And this is where I think we've got to be real. Like, what's happening in the room? What are we expecting to get out of it? How do we feel about that? Are we happy with it? Where does it land? Because it's not realistic, I don't think, to expect to have true belonging in every single room. In fact, you may not even have it in the workplace. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think you have to know where you want to belong, show up as yourself to belong there, but belong to yourself first. And that's the most important bit, right? Now, as I've done this over the years, my social circle has reduced, as I mentioned. I don't find that I attend as many events. Social events, gatherings, hang out with people. Sometimes I just don't want to. And I've learned that I would rather have a very small number of people and places that I genuinely belong in, rather than feeling like I have to be in ones where I can show up and perform because maybe I belong. I think this is the difference, especially through a work lens, because when people describe the feeling of genuine belonging, it's said that they have moments where they are being seen clearly. where they're being valued regardless of performance and they feel like their presence matters in itself. Now, this doesn't happen in every room, at every birthday party, every family event, or at every work event, meeting, or afternoon tea. And that's okay. It's about knowing when and where it should happen and not blaming others, right? Because sometimes we just don't show up as ourselves, or people don't show up as themselves because of the structures that exist, because of the titles that people might wear or might be attached to, because of how they think they should be performing, behaving, or acting. And so it's not so much about blaming or thinking this person did that and this is why this isn't working. It's just about knowing whether or not we're being present enough as ourselves to actually show up in ways that are real. Because if we don't do that, then how can we expect to belong? If we don't show up as ourselves in places, yet we're going, oh, I just don't really belong. I don't feel like I belong. I don't connect to anyone. Like, if we haven't shown up as ourselves, then how on earth can we actually expect to belong? We're asking people to accept a false version of us, and that's why it feels incongruent. That's why it feels exhausting. That's why it doesn't feel real. Those people are probably doing the best they can with what you're giving them, and so that's on you. And I've done this. I've shown up as a version that isn't myself and wondered why I didn't feel like I belonged. Well, it's because I wasn't being myself anyway. So how could someone accept me for who I am if I wasn't being who I am? It's such an interesting piece, because we've been told that to belong in certain spaces, especially work, we have to tick certain boxes, yet those boxes aren't ourselves. As I mentioned in the last episode, I'm not saying, we lower our standards and we can't be high performing, we can't have high expectations. Absolutely, those things matter and they must be made clear. That when we're asking people to go so far from themselves, or we're not open to including other aspects, then we're not allowing people to be authentic and to belong. And, I think some examples that come to my head, it could be around dress code. That's a really easy one. Like, I'm doing these podcasts right now in a t-shirt. Is it acceptable to just wear a t-shirt to work? In some places, no, you have to wear a button up. Or I, as a female, couldn't wear a t-shirt. Why not? And, obviously that's context specific, but dresses is one. And it's something I hear repeatedly in workplace. Oh, we don't wear jeans. Oh, we do wear jeans. Oh, we don't wear open-toed shoes. Oh, everyone has to wear closed-in shoes. That's a safety thing, that makes sense. But if it's not, like, why? And it's funny, even though that's might seem like a minute example, there's actually has been research about what you dress and how you wear clothes and certain things. And one, it will impact confidence, and it does have an impact on perception. And so we just have to be really clear around what that is. But if someone's having to dress a totally different way from how they might normally, then do they feel like they belong as themselves in those situations? So it's even little things to just be aware of. Now, in organizations where they heavily invest in belonging and inclusion, we know that they care because they want to do something about it, right? So there's an intent behind that. But the learning isn't a program. Zop Resilience isn't a program. Wellbeing isn't a program. They're not programs, okay? It's actually something that emerges from conditions like making sure we have psychological safety, conditions that mean everyone can be genuine within themselves, that there's equity, that people know there's shared purpose, that people have the freedom to disagree without losing who they are, without feeling like they're going to be told their opinion doesn't matter, without feeling like we're going to be ridiculed or laughed at. Like, this is how we build belonging. Yet, interestingly, in organizations, we almost feel like we have to perform belonging, events, initiatives, language, dress, as I've mentioned. And so that pushes us away from who we are. And without addressing these conditions, then we get this really wide gap between who we are as people, or the stated culture, and lived experiences. And so people feel the gap. And that gap creates this loneliness that can't be solved by a program. That's not what we're trying to do here. And so we have to be more aware of how we build belonging. Now, I think this happens at an individual level first and foremost. And I shared some of my experiences with you. And, I think too, back to my high school days, gosh, I wanted to belong. I think all teenagers do, teenage girls. We just want to belong in these cliques and in these groups. But so much of what I did to fit in wasn't who I am. Isn't who I am now, decisions I made. And you might say, well, as a teenager, that happens. And yeah, it does, sure. But there wasn't really an opportunity for me to even figure out what that was for me, because I was so obsessed with just fitting in. Everyone just wants to fit in as teenagers. And sometimes we carry that into the working world or adult world because we haven't sat long enough with asking, but who am I? What is belonging to me? And we could tell that into our values and things that are important to us and to what matters to us in life, absolutely. But we have to be able to be more present and less performative. We have to be able to be more authentic in the situations we choose to show up in the version of authenticity that applies to that. And I need to preface that choosing a version of authenticity is not the same as performing. I gave some examples earlier. It's not. So you need to be really aware within yourself. Am I choosing an authentic version of myself that fits this scenario or this setting, or am I performing? Just be really clear on what those things are, because the spaces will matter to how we build relationships and connection and belonging. And at an organizational level, a workplace level, we need conditions where people feel like they don't have to perform to stay safe. Now, of course, if they're doing something unsafe, we're not having that. It's not insane. But we don't want to have to perform and fit a box because we can't be authentic, or our authenticity is a liability. Like, that is not going to build belonging. And we want to have this understanding that, shared vulnerability is a prerequisite to belonging. No oversharing, but presence and saying no, we feel, and speaking up. And, if we do this, the parrots might partially be resolved if that ever happens. I'm not entirely sure. Because when we start looking for belonging, we start creating the conditions for belonging in ourselves first, and in the spaces we inhabit and shape at work. Then we start to feel more at ease with who we are. We stop feeling like we have to perform, and that's what we want. So I feel like we've been searching for this belonging, and some of us still are, and I did it for a really long time. Someone who turned 40 last year, I feel like maybe only in the last 2 or 3 years have I really got to a point where I'm like, I don't have to keep trying to find somewhere to belong. I just belong to myself, and then the spaces I show up in, I am who I am. And if I'm supposed to belong there, I will. And if I'm not, that's okay. That's okay. And so we feel like there's a destination for belonging, but I don't actually think it is. I think it's not something we find, it's built. It's built in yourself first. It's where we choose to be present. It's where we choose to be who we are. It's where we choose to be what matters to us, not curate a version we think that needs to matter in this situation just to ensure that we fit in. Because, to borrow the words of one of my favorite people, Brené Brown, the opposite of belonging is fitting in. And we are sometimes so busy fitting in. It takes away from actual belonging. And then we wonder why I don't belong. It's because you're too busy trying to fit in. Stop trying to fit in. Just be who you are and be where you are. Belonging actually doesn't require searching. It requires being. And that's the bit we haven't quite understood. So early people, I'm going to leave you with that, because I think that's really, really powerful, actually. I hope I captured that. I should write that down. I had a question for you. In the spaces you inhabit, work, home, community, are you showing up to be seen? As in for who you are? Or are you showing up to be approved of? Because I think sometimes we show up for approval and we don't always get that. And who's to even say that that's the right thing? And then you wonder why we don't belong. Now, this distinction tends to be where belonging either is or doesn't. And so take that with you and know that belonging is about being who you are and being where you are. That's what matters most. And then around you, belonging comes. It's not something you find. It's something you create and build. All right, Obi Beagle, I may see you in the next episode. As always, if you like this, do the share tag things. I don't know, whatever you do. And as always, have a wonderful day, evening, night, whatever time it is for you. And I'll see you somewhere soon. Bye.